All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the CMCF Harbor meeting. This is the afternoon meeting for most of the folks in the US. This is the 9th of October, and as always, this is a recorded meeting, so please adhere to the CMCF Code of Conduct. I have a couple of items in the agenda today. I first wanted to let everybody know that, we have a completed security policy for Harbor. So let me actually start sharing my screen so I can be showing you guys some of the items that I talk about. And the security policy for Harbor includes everything from the ability to register if you're a distributor of Harbor, as well as if you're a maintainer, like for example, Nathan and me. We also get the ability to have some information around when CVEs are discovered by either internal or external parties. We get to collaborate on them and also talk to the distributors of Harbor to make sure that they're aware of updates to Harbor that are coming down the line, and both inform them as well as give them the opportunity to react to those. We actually had our first CVE for Harbor that was released in mid-September, and we kind of followed that process, and basically I think there were some opportunities for improving that process, which we've taken immediately into consideration, and we actually incorporated them. And I can't speak to more than that, but Nathan, that's also part of our maintainers, has seen some of those updates, and as we're able to surface them out to our users and the bigger community, we'll educate everybody there as well. But make sure you read this. This is the github.com, go Harbor security policy, the URL. Go ahead and check it out and find out how Harbor intends to react to CVEs and security vulnerabilities, the releases that we support, which is the last 3 minor releases. And those are the ones that, as CVEs are found, we'll go back and patch those 3 versions of Harbor. So we are following a process very similar to other CNCF projects. So this is nothing new. It was just an opportunity for us to make sure we solidify our process and our disclosure process and educate everyone that works on Harbor on that. Cool. That was the first thing I wanted to mention. The second item is we're getting into the middle of the execution mode for 1.10. As you guys are aware, we're trying to ship a release candidate of 1.10 at or near the KubeCon US timeframe, which starts on the 17th of November. So it's a fairly shortened cycle, but even though it's aggressive, there was some long-standing work that started from as early as July that will land in this cycle. So we feel confident that we should be able to meet our dates. But should anything surprising come up, we'll obviously educate you all on this community meeting, as well as Slack and CNCF lists and through our blog and Twitter account. Just to give you guys a very quick highlight on some of the features that we have committed to. If anyone is interested, in each of these features, there's very likely a PRD, which is a product definition document that's included that kind of outlines in detail what the feature will entail and how you can use it. So for example, let's take one of these features, which is the limited guest role. So if I open this up, one of the things that's included here is a PRD that's written by the product management team that works on Harbor, specifically Alex and myself, and it includes a fairly detailed plan on how this feature is going to be implemented, the different investments we're making, pros and cons, and things that are non-goals for that scenario. So, since we're going to go through some of them, I might as well start with this. But if you see this feature, we're introducing a new user role in Harbor called a limited guest, where the purpose of introducing this is to give this user limited access into Harbor, because that's the type of user that's going to be using a multi-tenant project. So imagine you're a distributor of Harbor and you're a hoster, and you're creating a project where you're going to have multiple end users from different companies, but you don't want them to be able to see each other. So notice here how see a list of project members is a capability of a guest user in Harbor, but not the limited guest. Same goes with being able to see a list of project logs. And think about us enhancing this limited guest user in the future, and maybe even removing API and UI support. So what's going to end up is that you're going to have this user that behaves very similarly to a robot account, where he's only able to push or pull images. But you can also use that user through our identity federation. So you can have the same account span multiple projects because he has a federated identity in OIDC or LDAP, but at the same time, he doesn't have any access in terms of API or UI, so that you can kind of lock down your instance of Harbor. So these are some of the things we're working on, but the first step here is introduce limited guest, which is some limited permissions within a project. Any questions on that? All right, cool. Moving on to another capability for 1.10. We are working on a set of capabilities in Harbor to gain the C2 status. This is basically a CNCF guideline that basically enables projects to get silver or gold status by adhering to a certain set of programming methodologies, security policies, capabilities within the product, from logging to CI/CD. So we as Harbor have been meeting most of them, and there's a few things that are missing, and we're working on them. And the goal is by the RC timeframe to meet all of the needs of the C2 silver status, so we can apply for it and gain it for Harbor. I'll leave this for last. We are adding robot token expiration capabilities, so we're enhancing those. Some of our users have asked for this, so we're enabling them to control that. Next feature is the replication of the signing capabilities. If you guys remember, we kind of talked about this maybe a little bit over a month ago. If you set up a project in Harbor to be replicated from instance A to the instance B, one of the things that is not persisted through the replication is the signing. So the Harbor community has been working with the Notary and the Docker folks to figure out how we can enable this in Harbor. This is a long-standing commitment. It's not something we want to be delivered in 1.10, but we started working on it so that we can deliver it in a subsequent release. This is not just the Harbor team that needs to basically do work here. It involves a lot of work in Notary and Harbor and Docker, sorry. So just letting you guys know we're tracking on this, and we're not the only ones that are affected by this this issue here. So as we have more data to share, we will do so. At the crust of this problem, the issue is that the signing of the images in Notary include the URI of the hosting of the image, and that's what breaks when you replicate the images. So pervasive problem across other tools that have replication. The interrogation service, I'll talk about it when I talk about the pluggable scanning work in a second as well. Another item that's going to be a long-standing item by the community is the Kubernetes operator for Harbor. This is going in line with some of the investments that are happening in Kubernetes, and creating an operator for Harbor so that it will allow our end users to be able to stand up a Harbor instance, including HA Redis and HA PostgreSQL, as well as an HA installation of the Harbor and its compute nodes, all from the Kubernetes operator model, so that it gives easier access to Harbor to an ops team, everything from monitoring to deployment to out-of-box experience. We're also going to allow the robot account to delete images in a project. Simple enhancement also asked by end users. So these are enhancements to robot accounts. And we're also continuously enhancing webhooks. So I'm going to click on that so I can show you some of the webhooks that we're enhancing with 1.10. Specifically, some of the capabilities that we've added in 1.9 are tag immutability and tag retention. They did not have webhooks when we introduced the features. So now we're going back and kind of completing the lifecycle and management of these features by adding the ability of operators and administrators to be notified on different events that happen in those features. So for example, if you exceed your project quota, now you can configure a webhook so you can be notified when an image or a chart gets pushed to your project and it exceeds the quota. So if there's any more webhooks that you guys want to see from Harbor, please file some issues. Let us know what webhooks you want, and we can work on them in a future release. And last but not least, from our features is Immutable Repositories. We're gonna create a language very similar to how we've done tag retention that allows an administrator of a project to identify either a single image or a repository or even an entire project as immutable. And what we mean by immutable is that once you publish an image into Harbor, you can no longer change it. So think of me publishing the Redis version 1.2 image. I don't want anybody else in the project, whether they have privileges or not, to go and modify that 1.2 image. So for compliant reasons, I want that image to stay immutable. And if I want to patch it, then I have to create 1.2.1 or 1.3, for example. But I'm not able to change that immutable repository. So this enables operators that basically create a major release of the product to go back and define it as immutable and protect themselves from anybody, whether a bad actor or something that happens by accident, from overriding that image, so that their end users or developers that are deploying these images in production can stay confident that the image that they are deploying is the right one that was published originally by the CI/CD pipeline. The next one is not necessarily a feature of Harbor, but we are underway a security audit. So there's a third-party company that's sponsored by CNCF called C53, and they're doing a security and penetration testing of Harbor. They started 3 days ago, and they've already started identifying some issues or some areas where we can go and improve Harbor. Once the process is complete, the maintainers of Harbor will sit down with the C53 team and talk about areas that we need to tackle immediately and improve in Harbor. And eventually we'll publicize the report in the open for everybody to see. The reason that we're not disclosing everything right away, for obvious reasons, if there's a critical vulnerability found in Harbor, I want to give the team the opportunity to go and fix it immediately before any bad actors get an opportunity to view it and act on it and take advantage of Harbor. There's also one more minor feature, which is allow a user to create and submit their own CLI secret. That was also asked by users. Today, when you have an LDAP or an OIDC account in Harbor, we allow you to create your own CLI secret. Sorry, we allow you to create a CLI secret so you can interact with tools like Docker client and Helm client. But what if you wanted to have an external process or an external vault where you wanted to tell Harbor what the CLI secret needs to be and have Harbor respect it? That's what this capability will enable. As you see, 1.10 is packed with lots of small features and one big one, and that's the one I mentioned earlier, which is the pluggable image scanning work. That's part of the interrogation service that we're creating in Harbor, or essentially we're allowing any third party to come into Harbor and extend it using their own pluggable scanner, so that you can, if you don't want to use Claire as your static analysis tool, you'll be able to use Aqua or Anchor, and in the future you can think of additional companies coming in and introducing their scanner, companies like StackRox and Twistlog and Sneak. So we're looking forward to enhancing our ecosystem of partners within Harbor that come in and extend and add additional capabilities to Harbor to enable new scenarios for our users. Any questions so far on items that I've talked about for 1.10? You guys are a very quiet audience today. So what I'll do next, we have a few more minutes left, is I will go ahead and show you a sneak preview of the capabilities of Harbor with this pluggable scanner work that I have, that I mentioned earlier. And I want to make everybody aware that on the 15th, which is next Tuesday, Harbor will be on the CNCF webinar list. And me and Liz Rice, the chair of the TOC committee in CNCF, we're going to talk about this capability, since her team, she works at Agua, and her team is part of the team that's enabling this capability into Harbor. So let's get started. So the first thing, here you're seeing an early preview of a build of 1.10 for Harbor. And one of the things you notice here under the configuration tab is there's a new area called scanners. So here you have the ability to register a new scanner. So if your team has developed a scanner, you can provide the name, description, an endpoint URI, and how authentication will happen. So for example, basic authentication with a bearer token or API key. You get to introduce the scanner and test the connection, similar to how we do replication with third-party providers. So very similar UI here and model. And once you do, your scanner gets to get listed in this area. So today, Claire is the default scanner that ships with Harbor. Think of this as batteries included. When you get Harbor out of the box, Claire is the default scanner that we've had since the beginning of Harbor. But now you can add Trivi by Aqua team or Anchor. So I can actually expand this and see that Trivi scanner is enabled here by Agua Security. I see their version. I see the MIME types that are being supported, as well as the URI that the Trivi scanner is enabled. I see that it's healthy. And then I can see the same thing for the Anchor scanner as well. So both of these scanners are going to be the first generation scanners that we're going to ship in Harbor. Now, let's go back to a project and see how I can utilize one of these scanners. So I have this project called Scan here. And if I click on the scanner, you'll notice that I have Claire configured as my default scanner for this project. So it's healthy. I have the endpoint for it, and the vendor here is CoreOS. So let's take a look at one of our repositories. So this is a Golang image, and notice that it has a tremendous number of vulnerabilities here. So I have some highs, some medium, some low. And notice here that one of the other things is that with this new pluggable scanner, we're introducing a couple more categories like critical CVEs, as well as unknown CVEs, and negligible was always there. So now you actually get higher fidelity of categorization of the CVEs within Harbor. So let's go back to our project and configure now and change the scanner to be Trivi. Now, be aware, this is super early build, so some things may or may not work. We do have some bugs in this whole integration, so don't hold it against us. We're early on in this process, but I want to just give you guys a sneak preview here. So now Trivi scanner is healthy. So let's go ahead and go to our repository here. And I want to go ahead and get the scanner to work here. So when we scan an image by a pluggable scanner like Trivi or Anchor, they gain control of the image. So they have access to the image and repository in Harbor. And then their own engine that's basically published at the URI I mentioned gets to scan the image and return to Harbor a predefined set of JSON that basically describes the security posture of that image. And this is what Harbor gets to interpret later on and display these vulnerability guidelines. And ultimately, you're getting a yes or no pass of if your image is vulnerable or not, based on the policy that you have set up for your project. So for example, in your project, you say, I want to enable any image to be pulled if it has anything below a low CV vulnerability. Or you can say, I don't want you to be able to pull any image that has a critical CV. So you get to define the policy that dictates what images can be pulled, so you can protect yourself from vulnerable images to be pushed in production. And then these pluggable scanners between Claire, Trivi, and Anchor get to give you that answer. Do you have CVs or not, and at what severity level? So now if you see the Trivi scanner finished very quickly, and it discovered 11 critical, 10 high, and medium vulnerabilities. This is a different set of vulnerabilities that clear, because some of these different scanners do go and check different databases. And this is where we're giving choice to our Harbor users, where they get to actually pick the scanner that makes the most sense based on the workloads they're running. If they're running Alpine or they're running a different version of the Linux distribution, they can pick the scanner that meets their needs so that they can get the best information around vulnerability scannings. So notice now how Trivi was able to discover a much bigger range of vulnerabilities on my image, and it gives me as an operator a better report and information into the security posture of my image. And I can click on this and see a more detailed view of the vulnerabilities. So I get to see here, all the information that Trivi returned back for me. And that's it. That's all I wanted to show you guys. And I wanted to leave the last 3-4 minutes for questions. Any questions on some of this work? By the way, me personally, I'm super excited about this. This is a huge step in enabling Harbor to play better together with other ecosystem tools in the CNCF bigger umbrella. And we're adding significant value to our customers.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just had a quick question on the pluggable vulnerability scanners. Are those, you mentioned they're communicating back and forth via JSON. Is that like an open spec, or is that a Harbor specific spec that these vendors are coding to?
We've worked on we negotiated on a spec between us. I don't think there's a public specification on how this could happen today, unfortunately. The description of the CVE is we're adhering to industry standards there, but the communication of between Harbor and those things is something that we've negotiated.
That's a great feature. I just wanted to say, can you have multiple scanners scan an image and then aggregate those results back in Harbor?
We've actually thought about that, and I want to mention where the vision is of the interrogation service. So the interrogation service is a service that we're enabling so you can add multiple third-party components that can scan your images for things like license checking, static analysis, dependency. So in the future, we will allow you to run multiple scanners against the same image in the same project, but today we limit it to just one. But the vision is in the future to allow you to basically maybe run a scanner for security, run a different scanner for license check, a different scanner for security if you want to aggregate results across them. And then you can create a rule language that says, based on these scans, what is acceptable policy for an end user to pull an image? For example, if you fail the license check, do you still allow them to pull an image? If you fail the security check or the static analysis, do you allow them to pull an image? So because it has all these other implications in terms of the policy language that we need to create, we were not able to tackle that in 1.10, but that's coming. I can't tell you what release is coming, but we're going to work on that.
That's real exciting. Thank you.
Have you looked into more advanced policy around like if maybe I need to not prevent pulls for images that are out of policy or that have new vulnerabilities discovered that I'm already running in production environments? Like it would be dangerous in our environments, at least, to cut off the ability to pull images if they have new issues discovered. Any thoughts around that?
So if Harbor is going to be the one that where you pull the image from, will certainly prevent you from doing that. But I think a bigger problem there is, what if you have vulnerable images? Let's say, for example, and I'm sorry to be picking up on Redis. Let's say you have Redis 2.1 deployed in your Kubernetes cluster, and then Harbor runs its nightly scan and discovers new vulnerabilities in Redis. One of the things that we thought about doing, but we haven't gotten a chance yet, is create an admission webhook or something in Kubernetes, maybe a Sonobui plugin. Sonobui is a conformance OSS tool that you can run in Kubernetes cluster that will let you know that you have an active image being deployed that Harbor has detected a vulnerability. Honestly, we didn't have any resources to work on something like that yet, but that's something we would like to work on. If you're a developer and feel strongly about that, We'd love to have some contributions from you in this area and help you kind of define what that would look like.
Sounds good.
And I think I have a question here from Alex in chat. He's loving Harbor. Awesome. Love it, Alex. We love it as well. And you're looking forward to 110. So do we. Is there an estimate when the stable release of 191 will be available? You know, we're thinking that we'll deliver 191 on the 24th of October. That's kind of our estimate. Plus minus a couple of days, but I think we'll hit that date. And are there any plans to support pushing pulling Docker plugins? We are trying to think about adopting. We're actually involved in the OCI registry discussions, and we're trying to figure out how the bigger community will incorporate additional artifacts into the OCI registry beyond images and home charts. You can think of other things, right? You know, there's Docker plugins, like you mentioned, there's CNAP bundles, there's operators, there's all these different artifacts in the cloud native ecosystem that make sense to be pushed into Harbor, because you immediately get all this other policy around it, right? Compliance, RBAC, quota policy. So I think it's important for us to continue monitoring the OCI registry endeavor and figure out when the right time is to incorporate that in Harbor. I don't have a date for that, but our team is actually, and Steven Zhao specifically, is looking into that.
For folks who want to be able to contribute to that effort, do you have any pointers, or is it ready for that level yet?
If you want to contribute that, can you ping me privately on Slack? M2 is my alias, CNCF Slack, and I'll put you in contact with the right folks around this working group, and we'll make sure you guys get to contribute. You can also ask these questions in the Harbor Dev channel, and folks will answer you there. But if you ping me privately, I'll make sure you get routed the right way.
Thanks.
All right, and we have about a minute left. One of the other things that I want to mention is that Pivotal Network has made some announcements around what they call Pivotal Network Registry. That's basically being built on top of Harbor. So that's actually one more commercial distribution of Harbor out there. So we're really excited that we got to work with them, and they're enabling registry capabilities in the Pivotal Network directly. So cool stuff there. So if you use a lot of Pivotal, that's something that you. And I believe that team is going to come at one of our CNCF community meetings and demo that work at some point as well. Excellent. Well, thank you all for attending. Really appreciate your support and enthusiasm over Harbor. So continue, and we look forward to seeing you guys in future meetings. Have a good day.